Hello everyone and welcome back to SPL Book Talks. This week we figured we would grace you all with some scary stories that we know and we love, for it is the week of Halloween. I'm kicking off the week with a local scary story that I have heard during my time at the Chenango County Historical Society, and I've also just heard kind of talked about in general. This is a story that comes from Oxcarts along the Chenango, written by Roy Gallinger. Roy Gallinger was a historian who noted a lot of ghost stories and other fantastical things that happened in Chenango County, and he is most notably known for his books of folklore, which we have at the library in our vault if you would like to come and check them out. This story that I will be reading today is called The Phantom Saddle Horse. I know not what the truth may be. I tell it as 'twas told to me. Everyone likes a ghost story. One may not believe in ghosts, but there is something about a sane, intelligent man telling a ghost story that makes one think twice or thrice before passing an opinion. Such a man is an elderly gentleman who I will call John Lord, a man highly respected by his neighbors and not one given to telling false tales. The story is one I shall never forget, and I give it today as it was told to me and recorded in my book of notes. Some time ago, while on my weekly trip around Chenango County, I stopped in a modest little house where I knew I would find John Lord, who lived with his daughter and son-in-law on a country road. The old gentleman, whose eyesight is very dim, sits all day with his Bible and a thick magnifying glass on his lap, reading snatches of Holy Writ and living in the yesterdays. I had heard that John Lord had an extraordinary story, if he could be persuaded to tell it. A friend had told me that John Lord had not told it in many years, since the time the clergyman laughed at it. The poor old man, to whom the story had become a sacred thing, had resolved never to tell it again. I told him that there were many folks who would not laugh, and this seemed to encourage him. It happened in 1914, the aged man began, laying his pipe on the arm of his chair. Folks may never believe it, but both my wife and I saw it. But Jenny has been gone these many years. My wife's father fought in the Civil War. When the casualty lists were posted one day on the bulletin board outside the village hall, his name was listed as among the missing. Inquiries to the War Department revealed nothing. His fate would never be known. The nearly blind old man seemed to be looking out of the window to the distant hills despite the film that was slowly creeping over his eyes. A neighbor came in and sat down. The old man recognized the familiar smell of the neighbor's pipe. I almost wished he hadn't come. I told this a long time ago, Cal, the old gentleman said to his neighbor, but you used to laugh at us. That used to hurt Jenny terribly. I am going to tell it again, Cal, for the last time. This fellow wants to print it. I guess it won't hurt none now that Jenny's gone. He filled his pipe from a leather sack but didn't light it. One moonlit night, Jenny went to the back door, he said, looking at me but not seeing me clearly. She had heard something outside in the yard, something like a harness rattling on a horse. Jenny, thinking it was a horse belonging to a neighbor, walked out to catch it. As she stepped outside into the yard, the big horse galloped past her, snorting and wild. It flashed past her in the moonlight, and she saw the swinging bridle reins and the empty saddle, the stirrups swinging and shining in the moonlight. The narrator stopped and looked toward the hills again. Even neighbor Cal was still. Then the white-haired old man went on. The big horse came back at Jenny, reared into the air, and something shadowy seemed to fall from the horse's back. Jenny screamed, and I ran out just in time to see the big black, his bridle and stirrups swinging, disappear into the night. All I saw about the horse was a large white spot on his forehead. I was pretty shaky myself, the man went on. I carried Jenny into the house and called Dr. Sherman, who lived across the road. It was midnight before he could revive my wife. She never really got over it. John Lord struck an old-fashioned match on the arm of his chair. His hand was shaking. "What did you find out, Mr. Lord?" I asked. He was silent for a moment. Some years later, my wife's brother, who was a teacher up in the college, learned of a man in another state who was in the same cavalry regiment as his father. The old man said in a whisper. A man, Charles F. Peterson, told him that a number from a patrol were captured by the rebels. 3 of them made a break for liberty during the night, and Jenny's father was riding a big black horse with a white star on its forehead. A volley of bullets was fired into the escaping men, and the big black leaped into the air, and both horse and rider went down together. The rebels buried both on the field. The old man was getting tired and leaned back and closed his dimming eyes. Mister, I am sure that what I saw in the yard that night was no dream. I think the big black and his rider came back to tell us what had happened to Jenny's father, long after the war was over. Do I believe what John Lord told me? Yes. I don't think that such a fine old man would knowingly spit that yarn for the sake of telling it. John and Jenny Lord saw something that night. Whether natural or supernatural is not for me to decide.